everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be diving into the new palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills. This is called the Primrose All-in-One Face and Eyeshadow Palette. This palette retails for $55. I picked this up on the Anastasia Beverly Hills website. It is now available at other retailers. I will link them all in the description box down below in case you're interested. So as you can tell, this palette comes with 10 different eyeshadows and 2 blushes, but obviously you can use the blushes on the eyes as well. I have been wanting to play with this for a minute, but everything got put on the back burner, and I am feeling a sense of needing makeup therapy right now. I need to get back to things that make me happy, and creating content makes me happy, and I love playing with new makeup, and I love reviewing makeup, and I love turning on the camera and sharing my love for makeup with you guys, and I need makeup therapy. So I was excited to open up this palette today and play with it and share my thoughts with you. Of course, I will swatch this palette, and I will also compare it to other palettes that I have in my collection that might be similar in color story, so that you guys can decide, is this a palette that you want to get in your collection? So we're going to get into all of that today. I'm going to give my full thoughts on it. We're going to first jump into me using the palette, and then of course we will get into the swatches and comparisons, and then of course I will get into my final thoughts. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump straight into the applications, and I will see you guys all in my final thoughts. Okay, so let's start playing with this new palette from Anastasia. It comes in really pretty packaging. I have to say, I am pretty impressed with the packaging on this. And it's been a while since I bought a palette from Anastasia. I haven't bought really any of the big ones, you know, that they have released. And so it's been, I think the last palette I bought, I could be wrong, but off the top of my head, I feel like it's Jackie Aina's palette in collaboration, or maybe the Carly Bible palette. I'm not sure which one came first. So I don't have any concealer on, and the reason for that is because it's always been my experience. Anastasia does have kind of a messy formula. It's a little bit powdery, and I always experience fallout when I use their shadows. I think I'm going to go directly into that peony shade because I think it's such a beautiful shadow. So I'm going to grab the Smith 253 brush, and I'm going to pick up this shade right here. I'm putting it on dry. That sparkling ember is very, very chunky. Let me show you guys what it's looking like since I stuck my finger in it. See how it's got some chunk to it? It's a really beautiful shadow, but it's got some chunk to it. If you're going to use that, I would highly, because I didn't get much fallout with this shimmer shadow, but sparkling amber, I can tell based on picking it up, you will probably get a lot of fallout with that shade. So I'm going to grab the BK Beauty and Angie Hot and Flashy brush. This is the A504. I want to go into the shade Honey, this one right here, because I want to see if that shadow has any depth. Sometimes looks can be deceiving, and sometimes it might look like it doesn't have any depth, but once you put it on, you might see something different. So I'm just going to bring that in the crease. Now I'm going to go into Rouge. I love that peony shade. Ooh, it's so pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and put concealer on, and I will be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and threw on some concealer. Let's go ahead and move on to the lower lash line. I'm actually going to start with that darker shade, this Rouge. I'm going to be using the BK Beauty 204, and I'm just going to put that like right here. Because I don't want it to be too pink eye, I'm going to grab a little bit of the shade Saddle, this one right here, because it's so warm. Sometimes when I have a shade that is this color of pink that can make my eyes look a little pink eye, I will go into a warm shade and it will just kind of take that tone down just a little bit. So I'm going to grab that and bring it right along here. I'm also going to put the shade Saddle up here in the crease, just a tiny, tiny bit, just to kind of bring some warmth to it. Now, I could use this shade, but I'm actually going to use this shade, which is Claret. And I'm going to place that right here at the base of the lashes, just to give some really pretty, yeah. That color looks really pretty next to that peony, doesn't it? I'm also going to bring that right on the lower lash line and kind of use it as a guide. So I'm just going to grab a pencil brush and I'm going to grab just a tiny bit of rose water, this one right here. I don't really like it on the brow bone, but it's pretty on the inner corner. Okay, so I went ahead and just put on some mascara. Let's go ahead and put on the blush. I don't have anything on my face except for concealer, foundation, and I put a little bit of powder right here and right on the center because I was shining off of these lights. So I wanted to put some blush on before I put like bronzer or contour or anything like that on because I wanted you guys to see what the colors are. So I'm gonna first go into the shade Grapefruit, and I've got two clean, exact blush brushes. These are the Rephr number 4 brushes. I love them, and they're both clean, so that is a miracle. So I'm gonna grab this Grapefruit shade. Ooh, the pigment. On my skin tone, this is a pop of color. It's not really showing up that much on my skin, which is kind of a bummer, but it is what it is. It's quite light, and if you're darker than me, this is not going to work for you. So this is kind of, this I will never use as a blush. I will never use it as a blush. So I'm going to go ahead and use this brush, and I'm going to go into the shade Saddle, which this one has definitely got some color to it. And I'm going to go in super lightly because wow. I don't know. This is a pretty color, but I don't know that it's my favorite on me. I feel like I put bronzer on in a weird way because it's so orange. It's got such a strong orange tone to it. It's a little strong. It's pretty, but I don't know that I love it for a blush. I'm going to be honest. Maybe once I put the rest of my makeup on and I put some bronzer on and maybe put some, you know, powder on and kind of buff it all in and see what it looks like then. But it's not my favorite right now. Okay, so I'm back. This is the final look. Lippy I'm wearing, I grabbed the Charlotte Tilbury Lip Cheat in the shade Hollywood Honey. That's the shade I'm wearing as far as the lip liner. And then I grabbed my Charlotte Tilbury Angel Alessandra. This is one of my favorite shades. And this is from her Hot Lips 2. So these are the two that I'm wearing on my lips. And it was a great combo for this eye look. So let's go ahead and jump into the second look using this palette. When I got done filming with this palette the first time, my desk was a mess. That's pretty standard in my experience with Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes. I want to start with this Primrose shade. It's kind of more of a unique shade in the palette. So let's just try it. I want to kind of play with it, see what it looks like on the lid. I'm gonna grab my Sonia G Worker from the Lotus collection, and I'm gonna go into the shade Primrose right here. Until I kind of know the pigment, I am gonna tap off because I don't want to apply like too much and then have to work really hard to get it to blend out. So I'm basically gonna put this on the lid and kind of work it up and into the crease. Okay, so that shade is a little patchy. I am able to blend it, but it's a little patchy. It's not as smooth as you would hope. It's just a little patchy. Yeah, it's not my favorite. I don't love that formula, and I don't... It's like once you put it on, it's really hard to blend it out. You have to really get in there, and this is kind of a more dense packed brush, so this would be a brush that you would use for something like that. But man, it is, I'm like struggling right here. I'm gonna go in and kind of add a little tiny bit just to kind of fill in some of those gaps. I just don't love this. Okay, I'm gonna wipe the brush off. And I'm going to go into the shade Mango. And I'm going to use Mango to kind of fill in some of those gaps where it's patchy. I feel like Mango might help to kind of fill in some of those areas, those sparse areas. Kind of give it some warmth as well. I'm going to go directly over top of that purple and just really kind of... Now, Mango, you can see, is pretty pigmented because, I mean, it covered that purple instantly, right? So Mango is, it is a lighter shade, but really pigmented. But now that I have it over top, you can really see how choppy and how patchy that purple shade was. Like, it's just, it's really stiff. It's got like a really stiff, kind of dry texture to it. And I think that's what's contributing to it being more, you know, hard to blend out. So I'm going to go into Rouge, and I'm going to kind of just deepen up some of the outer corners here with the shade Rouge. I don't like this. I do not like this. No, I can't keep it. I'm not going to continue on because this is not pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe it off, and I'll be right back. So I wiped that off. I'm glad. I was hoping I could salvage it and kind of just work around that shade, but it just, you know, it wasn't meant to be, and I had to move on. So I think what I'm going to do is I want to put the shade Mango on the crease. I actually want to see what that shade looks like because, like I said, it's really light in the pan, but it had pigment. I was really impressed with the pigment over that purple. It is a pretty shade, and it's showing up on my skin tone, which is pretty impressive because it's pretty light, but I am able to build it. Now I'm going to dip into the shade Rouge, and I am going to kind of put that right there at the base of the crease. Kind of blending that out, but I'm wanting to keep it kind of in the crease. So I'm just using it to kind of carve it out. Kind of create that line and definition right there. Kind of got that where I want it. It's nice and blended. I'm going to mix between these two. So I'm going to grab Rouge and Saddle. And I'm going to bring this down onto the lid and kind of just have it as a base. Okay, I'm going to take my finger down into Fire Opal, and I'm going to be really careful. So this is Fire Opal. I'm going to take my finger down into Fire Opal, but it's a very chunky shade. So I'm going to show you here on my finger. You can kind of see how chunky it is. So because it's, oh, my nails are filthy. I got lotion underneath my fingernails. So there's that. But because it's such a chunky shadow, I don't want like a lot of it because I'm going to try to use my finger and kind of spread it out. And it is, I mean, a little tiny bit of the shadow goes a really, really long way. So I didn't want to get like too much on the finger and then have to work really, really hard to kind of blend it out. I'm going to dip my brush into Fire Opal just a tiny bit. This is my blending brush. And I'm going to bring a little bit of that up and into the crease, but I'm kind of just doing it in like slow. I'm kind of just taking my time. I don't want to bring a lot of it. And this, of course, is going to cause a lot of fallout. So I would not recommend doing this if you have concealer on, because that's going to be a mess. I will say, because the Fire Opal is so chunky, it works well in the crease. It does. This is what I'm doing. So let me wipe my brush off. This is what I'm doing. I'm just like tapping into it and picking up the tiniest amount, tapping off and then bringing it into the crease. So it is working quite well in the crease. I'm gonna take my Smith 253. I'm gonna go into the shade Sparkling Amber, this one right here. Holy smokes, that's chunky. Okay, I want you guys to see this on the brush. That's a chunky shadow. That's a lot of pigment. And I am gonna bring that in the center. And I'm putting it over top of that red because I kind of wanted those two together, and those two shadows together are very beautiful. Okay. So I went ahead and threw on some concealer. I'm gonna now go into Mango. And of course I'll use the shade Mango as kind of like the base. And I'm gonna blow Mango out just a little bit. I'm using the Wayne Goss number 7 brush. Now I'm gonna go to the Refer number 26 brush, which I love this brush, by the way. I'm gonna dip between Rouge and Saddle, and I'm gonna bring that right along the base of the lashes. I'm gonna go into Rouge, and I'm gonna bring that right close to the lash line, kind of tight lining with it. Okay, so I am back. I went ahead and threw on a pair of lashes. Let's go ahead and jump into the blushes. I put some bronzer on, but I haven't, it's kind of a rough application, if you will. The last time I used these two blushes, I was not a fan. I didn't really fall in love with them. I felt like this was just too light for my personal skin tone, and I felt like this was just way too orange, almost to where it wasn't pretty. For me, I didn't love, you know, here's the thing. When I apply blush, I like blush to give the cheek some color, like that flesh tone color, whether it's a peach or a pink, sometimes a little bit of like a plum base, but I've never had my cheeks turn orange. Now, of course, I do like wearing a warm tone bronzer, but that's to kind of add warmth. I just wouldn't even really recommend using this as a bronzer because it's so orange base. Because I did Grapefruit on one side and Saddle on the other, I want to dip between both of them and see if kind of mixing them together will be a better application. So I've got my brush here. It's been wiped off on a towel, but it's not fully clean. You know how that is. I'm gonna go right between the two shades. So here you can see I have both of them on the brush. I'm gonna tap off, and I'm just gonna kind of, I don't want this to be too heavy. So I'm gonna go right here and apply some blush. Oh, you guys. I can't. I got way, so I thought I dipped. Oh, damn it. Hold on. So I tapped off, but it's a lot of pigment. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and throw some setting powder on and kind of buff this together, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. I tried to kind of buff everything together. Thank goodness for setting powder, because setting powder kind of saved the day. Yeah, the blushes are just not my favorite. I think that's pretty apparent. By the way, I wanted to mention, I wanted to kind of have a pop of something a little bit bright on my lip. So I grabbed this, which is the Charlotte Tilbury Love Flame. This is one of her new, this is one of her holiday lipsticks, in her holiday launch. It's not my favorite only because it comes out of alignment, because this little gold piece like twists, and then I have to kind of mess with it. Charlotte Tilbury is sending me a new one. I bought 3 of them. All 3 of them do that. So it just comes out of alignment like this. And then I have to sit there and fix it. And it's a big pain in the butt. But it is a pretty shade. And I wanted to kind of see how it would look with this really pretty coppery, fiery type of looks, and it kind of brought it all together, and I really, really like it. So that's it for look number 2. Let's go ahead and jump into the swatches. We're going to get into the swatches, and I'm going to compare this palette to a lot of other palettes that I have in my collection that might be similar in tone, and then of course I will jump into my final thoughts. So I will see you guys then. Okay, so now that we've made it through the swatches and comparisons, let me go ahead and get into my final thoughts about this palette. I don't think this is going to be a surprise. I'm not in love with this palette for multiple reasons, but I just don't love it. Number one, I do not like the blushes whatsoever. Don't get me wrong, the Refer brush might have picked up too much, right? So it's always going to depend on what brush you use, and it is a natural haired brush, so that natural haired brush might have picked up so much. Even though I kept tapping off, I actually made a huge mess when I was applying the blushes because I was tapping really good to make sure that it wasn't going to be a lot of pigment. But it's so much pigment, and this is such a dark shade. Every time I've used it, I have just not enjoyed the experience, and Grapefruit is just not really dark enough to show up on my skin tone. So that's why I was hoping by like mixing them together, I would be okay with it. But the blushes are a no. If I take off the blushes, then I'm paying $55 for 10 eyeshadows. Now, Anastasia has a pretty good formula, but it's so messy that it has to be a particular look that I'm looking for that makes me reach for an Anastasia palette, because I just always make a mess. Always. Whether it's fallout on the eye, fallout all over my counter, it's just always a mess. So that kind of pulls me away from using it. But these shadows, in my opinion, are much messier than what we're even used to when it comes to Anastasia's palettes. In my opinion, I personally feel like this palette is overpriced for what it is. And I would say my favorite palettes from Anastasia Beverly Hills is the Jackie Aina palette. Oh, that's a good palette, you guys. And then the Soft Glam, the Carly Bible, like those three are kind of my top 3 favorites. Ones that I reach for on a regular basis. The rest of them, I just don't reach for. This is going to be that kind of a palette. This is so messy that it just makes it to where I don't want to use it. And I don't really like, I mean, here's the thing. My eyes look really beautiful right now, but these shimmer shades are super chunky. But even though I really like the looks that I created with it, I have a lot of palettes that have the shades that I used to create the looks that I created in other palettes with less mess, less fuss, and just an overall easier experience to create the eyeshadow looks. So overall, this is a huge pass. This shade was definitely disappointing. I mean, obviously you saw I had to wipe it off because it just was very, very dry and patchy, which Anastasia Beverly Hills kind of has that drier formula. And it seems like if they try to go outside of their normal matte shadows, they run the risk of it kind of becoming a dry, patchy disaster. And that's kind of exactly what happened with this shadow. Because they put a little bit of those glitter particles in it, which, by the way, you couldn't see it on the lid. So you can see it looking down into the pan, but when I put it on the lid, I was not able to see it because they're so finely milled. So that's it for the review, you guys. Sound off down below in the comment section. Let us know. I know that this palette is highly rated on the Sephora website. I was noticing that this has a lot of good reviews. So this is just my opinion based on, you know, using it twice now. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. If you've already bought this palette, because it's been out for a minute now. So if you guys have already bought this palette and you're loving it, share with us in the comment section down below. Like I've always said, makeup is very subjective and we all have a different experience with it and we all want something different. And if you bought this and you're loving it, or if you're like me and you're not loving it, share with us in the comment section down below your experience with it overall. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me in today's video. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day and I will see you all in my next video. Love you. Bye.